Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most and do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right, no extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
Welcome to another episode of The Wealth Flow. I'm excited about my guest, Mr. Zachary Beach. Zachary is the CEO and partner of Smart Real Estate Coach, which is a 2-time Inc. 5000 fastest growing company that focuses on transforming W-2 employees into creating financing real estate investors. With a passion for business, he also partners in original real estate and Wicked Smart Finance, as well as natprocessing.com. Zachary is also a 3-time Amazon best-selling author with the following books: Real Estate on Your Terms, New Rules of Real Estate Investing, and Selling with Authority for Real Estate Investors. Zachary and his team have completed 600 deals across the country and control about $60 million of real estate at any given time, with little to no money in the deal and no banks involved. So I'm excited to hear about this, Zachary. I appreciate you being on and welcome to The Wealth Flow.
Yeah, Keith, I'm excited to be here. I was actually just listening to a couple of your podcasts in preparation for this, so sounds like we're going to have a great conversation today.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. All right. Well, if you maybe want to start, Zachary, with kind of just, the beginning, growing up and kind of what led you to real estate. So.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. And we could take this in many different directions. I'm an open book. So, but the way my real estate career kind of panned out was, I was one of those kids. I was a poor kid growing up in a rich town. So I always grew up with a chip on my shoulder, and I always was looking at the other side of the town. Wanted to be in like all those great neighborhoods with $1 million homes. And what I realized over time was that they were either entrepreneurs or involved in some sort of investing. But I didn't know that at the time until I moved back there, which was recent. And so what I tended to find, though, was I was one of those kids that just did everything in spite of what, people told me, which was, the only reason why I went to college was because somebody told me I couldn't. So when I eventually left college, I had no idea what I was going to do because I was just doing it in spite of others at that time. So I became a bartender. What any good educated person would do, they start bartending. So I did that for about 4 years, and it was about, just going into about the 5th year, 4.5 years. I just remember being exhausted. Me and my wife were both doing it at the time. I was staying up late at night, bartending, and then I was waking up really early, personal training. So I was burning the candle at both ends. So what I ended up doing was I approached my father-in-law. He was in real estate investing for a long period of time, but then got crushed in 2008. And I saw him, reinventing his business. He just started a brand new real estate investment company, all specifically around creative financing. So what I did was I approached him and I said, hey, I don't know if I'm going to like real estate investing because I know literally nothing about it, but it's going to be better than this. So at that time, we ended up making a connection. So what I ended up doing is just start dabbling in the real estate business, started doing some things like cold calling. And it took me a couple months to eventually get my first deal. And right around that time, I burned the ships and said I'm all in now at real estate investing. And it was a big risk at the time. I literally had no idea what I was doing, but that was kind of the origin story of investing in real estate.
Sure. When it was the cold calling and stuff, what type of properties were you calling on?
Yeah, I started out with single families, and we still primarily do single families, especially with our students across the country. I am sitting in a commercial building that we bought on creative financing as well, and have done some multis there as well. But primarily single families, and I always like to say this, and that is, I got into the sexiest part of real estate investing, which most real estate investing, especially if you're active, is not sexy at all. It's literally having hundreds and thousands of conversations with people either over the phone or in person. It's not, like HGTV where you see these different, videos or segments where somebody sees a really crappy house and that's beautiful and, they make a ton of money. At the end of the day, it's really a people business and it's consistent conversations over time. So that's really where I started diving in, which was, cold calling and starting to book appointments and then eventually structuring deals.
That's awesome. That's a great foundation for sure. And it's good that you had somebody to go in. So with your father-in-law, did he already have cold calling? Was he doing like direct mail? How was he coming up with the potential leads that you would then try to schedule appointments with?
Yeah, it's not much different than we do today, 10 years later. And that is it's either us, our student, our virtual assistant, making either cold calls to a specific list, along with some direct mail. And, nowadays you can do some more, more creative things like doing ads and things of that sort, a little bit different than when we first started, but still our bread and butter is communicating directly with people. Specifically, expired listings has been maybe about 85% of the deals that we've done over the past 10 years, especially with creative financing. And the reason why that's such a powerful niche or such a powerful list is, especially for creative financing, is it's already been on the market, which means that they're looking to sell. And two is the traditional market has now rejected them trying to sell. And that could be for many different reasons. It could be layout, it could be purchase price, a condition, you name it. So now they're looking for alternative options because they tend to be more motivated because they're now they have limited choices. When I say they, the seller now has limited choices on how they're actually going to sell their property or exit out of their property. And that's when we would come into play and give some different options.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great to hear. And I did the same thing as a real estate agent. That was sort of one of my bread and butters was expired listings. And you're right. The owners oftentimes they get a little frustrated, and oftentimes it's not, they went from listing agent to listing agent to listing agent to finally being, just like, okay, I can't sell this. So that's good.
Oh yeah, Keith. I mean, the reality is most of the time it has nothing to do with the agent. It's not the agent's fault. Your job, I mean, my father-in-law was a broker owner for 18 years. My brother-in-law, who's I also partnered with, was a realtor for 8. The reality is you as an agent or a broker, you're giving them feedback. And most of the time people don't listen to the feedback. So then what's their option? I mean, especially when it comes out the market, their option now is to either handle the feedback, which could be improve the property or maybe change something that you originally had stated, or lower the price. And most people don't want to hear that. And especially in today's market, which is the reason why we've seen a dramatic shift with creative financing and doing more and more deals, especially coming out of COVID. And that is everybody thinks their property is worth what it was 6, 12, 18 months ago with the COVID market. So now you have tons of unrealistic expectations. And here now we can swoop in and structure a deal that gets them closer to that expectation because we care more about the terms of the deal than we do about the price.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good way to do it. So like aside from expired listings, what are some of the other avenues or methods that you tend to get? Sounds like a lot of them from expired, but
yeah, expired, for sale by owners. You got niche lists. We buy a lot of properties that are debt-free homes. That's about a third of the market. Properties in the United States are debt-free. That we love those types of properties because now we can structure some really great creative financing terms, not only for us, but for the seller themselves. And that also tells us something specific about that seller as well, which is if you don't have a mortgage on the property and it's debt-free, it tends to mean the seller's in a good financial position, because if they weren't, they would have refinanced or put debt on the property. So now we know that the seller is in a good financial position, which then creative financing could be even more advantageous for them. Like this commercial building that we bought. This seller literally had a sign outside that said, wants to do owner financing on this property. And he wanted tax purposes, tax and estate planning purposes, because we think he knew that he didn't feel well at the time he ended up passing away, and we're paying his estate right now. So he has this great commercial property, mixed use. It's in Middletown, Rhode Island, which is known this one highway is known as like $1 Million Row because of the traffic that comes through here. So very tourist driven area. And he was looking for cash flow on the property. He didn't want to deal with maintaining the units anymore, but he wanted cash flow. So then we ended up structuring a really great seller financing deal where he became the bank, and now we're just continuing to make payments to his estate. So great opportunity for them, because now his tax liabilities coming over time versus a giant lump sum. So it worked out really well for us and worked out really well for his family right now as well.
Yeah, that's great. And then what about, so when you're buying these or helping your students buy these, what's the end game? Is it for them to, cash flow on the property, hold it with that creative financing, or what's the objective, or what are you typically doing on those?
Yeah, it depends on the student, but let me say this. When most of our students that come in are interested in either leaving their W-2 job or creating a different lifestyle. And so what we have done is we've trademarked a 3 payday system, and this is how it works. So when we acquire a property creatively, we tend to sell it creatively, so via rent to own or owner financing, because then that allows us to do a couple things. Number one, it allows us to collect a large lump sum, so we can collect anywhere from 3 to 10% of an inflated price, a premium. Let's say inflated, but a premium. So that way we can collect a large lump sum right up front. We have a buyer in the house. We also now are able to collect cash flow, which is our payday 2. And we're also able to build an equity into the property. Even throughout that entire time frame, we're not landlords. So now, because we pass along any and all responsibility to our end buyer. So this allows a brand new investor, or even a seasoned investor, to be able to create lump sums, cash flow, and build in profits without having to now take on another, say, W-2 of now managing a property. And then the other reason why we exit that way is because most people, if they're interested in leaving their W-2, the fastest way we believe to accumulate enough cash flow or enough money in order to eclipse a salary can come through receiving these large lump sums and cash flow. Because if we were just in the buy and hold business, how many properties do you need in order to, eclipse a $100,000 salary at $200 to say $500 a month per property? It's a lot. So we try to help people exit out significantly faster. And then we'll talk about the long-term strategy. Then we could say, all right, well, now let's start buying maybe multi-units or holding on to some of these properties. So now we can just cash flow them and get appreciation over time. So we are primarily exiting our deals, creative financing, and then we'll see. Then we'll look at the long-term picture after that as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's like you said, then you're not the one responsible for doing the repairs. And quite honestly, if you're renting it out, on single family, it can vary how long they're going to be in there, right? If it's a true renter, but with them having skin in the game with that down payment, that makes a whole lot of sense. What geographic area are you? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I'll just give an example so that way people can kind of hear how the process works. So just give an example. If you go ahead and you acquire a property, say from a seller for $300,000, you then can go ahead and say sell that property at maybe a 10% premium, so $330,000. And say on that $300,000 house, the PITI, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, or say $1,500. You're gonna be able to charge probably around like $2,000, $1,800 to $2,000, let's say, on that property. So what we do is we buy it either with controlling the property like a lease option, or we take ownership like on seller financing or buying it subject to the existing loan. And I can go as deep into these different types as you like. And then what we'll then do, so now we have the terms of the agreement either through ownership or control, which now allows us to go market to buyers that need time in order to qualify for loans. Now you're talking like, your entrepreneurs. My first house I ever bought was through rent to own. I couldn't go qualify for loan. I was an entrepreneur at the time. Or somebody had a legitimate hiccup in their credit. So now what we do is we bring these buyers through a vetting process. Now that buyer typically on a 330 house is now going to come to the table with anywhere from $15,000 to, say $33,000. So that now comes to that investor. It's non-refundable. So now that investor has that amount of money, puts it in their pocket. That does get credited towards the purchase price. So when they go get their own loan, because the whole idea is to move them from not bankable to bankable. Now during that process, I'm now collecting $2,000 from my buyer via rent. I'm going to pocket $500 of it, and now I'm going to pay the $1,500 to the bank, the principal, interest, tax, and insurance. So now I have my lump sum, now I have my cash flow. And then also during the time of that deal, I'm going to be making payments on that loan, and that loan is going to go down over time. The way we structure our deals is we actually lock it in equity position with the seller and not a price, so that way we are benefiting for the principal pay down, whether we own it or just controlling it. So now during that time frame, we're now benefiting from that principal pay down. So now let's say that $1,500 monthly payment, just for example, $500 of that is going towards the original principal balance. That's $6,000 a year that you're now building into your profits on that deal. So a deal that lasts, 3 years, is an extra $18,000. So if we're just like calculating that deal in itself, you got $15,000 down, you got another $6,000 a year in cash flow, $6,000 a year in principal pay down. These deals start to add up rather quickly. And that's why we start to see over about a 3 to 5 year span, at the lowest, like a $45,000 total paydays. But then we're starting to see when you get into say the seller financing and ownership of these deals, they could get upwards as $250,000 in total profits over that course of those years as well. So that's where the power comes with that creative financing across the board.
Yeah, that's really neat. And I didn't even think about the fact that you could do something like this with without even actually purchasing on that lease option. So you mentioned that part of the principal pay down you're getting a credit for. So that's coming off of the price that you've kind of agreed in the future that you'd pay, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you guys want to see like this in live motion, our YouTube channel, we go over, it's called Deal Structure Sundays. And every single Sunday we release a deal structure that's either us or the deals we help do with our students. So if you're utilizing, say, our agreements, the way our agreements work on a lease option. So a lease option tends to be a really easy way, or a simple way, let me say it, not easy, but a simple way to enter into creative financing, because these are the deals you see no money down, right? No money down. These deals, the title's not transferring. Really what a lease option is you have the ability to control the asset for a certain period of time before you have to cash out the seller. Now, the way we built out our agreements, which I think we're doing differently than everyone else, is that instead of us saying to the seller, I'm going to agree to pay you, say, in that example, $300,000. I have an option for $300,000. Instead, what we do is we look at the existing balance of the loan, and then we determine how much equity is in the deal. So let's use that example again, and let's say the balance of the loan today that we're agreeing upon with the price is $250,000, and the seller has $50,000 in equity. So our agreement now, what it does is it locks in $50,000. 50,000 equity. So what we're really agreeing to is on and before a time in the future, we're going to pay off your loan, which we know the loan's going to be lower in say 3 to 5 years, and we'll pay you $50,000. So now every single month that we're making those payments on the property, we're the ones that are actually getting the benefit of the principal going down because we're only paying the seller the $50,000 plus whatever the loan is at that time. So that's how you start building in equity into deals you don't even have ownership of.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I like that. What is there a specific area that you focus on, or is this all across the U.S., or kind of what's that look like?
Yeah, we're all across the U.S., but the best thing about this is, and you, over time, when you're doing creative financing, most people will say, like, there's certain markets you can't do deals in. But I mean, I could share with you almost every single market that everyone said you can't do creative financing deals specifically that we're doing. So just in the last, what's today? The 19th of June is today. So we're 19 days into June, and we have 2 deals in Southern California. We got another deal just popped up in Southern Florida. Well, we had a deal in New York, a deal in Denver, 2 deals in Denver, actually. 2 deals in Denver and a deal in Michigan, or we're outside of Detroit. So it varies. I mean, you're in the Midwest to the Northeast, as that's where we built our business, to the Southeast, all the way across to, California as well. And the beautiful thing, though, too, is if you get into some of these markets that are more heavily investors, like, say, Southern California or Southern Florida, when you look at a market like that, it may take you more leads. When I say lead, like a qualified person per deal, but the deals in which you do generate significantly more profits because you now have a place in which, like Southern Florida, where buyers from all across the United States, and when I say buyers, I don't mean wholesale buyers or investors, I mean people that legitimately want to be homeowners, you now have a very valuable asset which drives up the profits on these deals, which means you can increase the price higher, you can get, it'll generate a larger down payment, so now you get more profits from less deals. A property we just did in Southern California, we have a student out there, he's actually one of our coaches now. He just did another deal, and it required a $100,000 down payment up front, and then he's collecting another $200,000 over the course of another 3 years. So these deals can be quite significant once you get involved in them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then what about if there is an existing note? Do you do any like contract for deed type transactions, or do you see much of that?
Yeah, so I would kind of put that on the like subject to type transaction. Yeah, we do lots of sub to in every different market out there. I honestly think that that's probably one of the most underutilized real estate techniques, and I think a lot of it comes out of fear. I mean, just people just don't understand how to actually put them together, and everyone's always afraid of the due on sales clause. But there's so many different ways in order to structure these types of deals when it comes to buying a property subject to the existing loan. So I'll walk through exactly what that means first, just in case your audience this is new to your audience. And that is, buying a property subject to existing loan just simply means that you approach a seller that has debt on the property, has a mortgage. You close on it as the investor, but the loan remains attached to the seller's credit, so you don't pay it off. If you've ever done a traditional real estate transaction, on the closing documents themselves, there's actually a section that says subject to, and that's exactly where that loan would go. Now, you brought up contract to deed. There's buying properties in trusts. So there's so many ways in order to construct it. When we do real estate transactions subject to the existing loan, our attorney advised us to create a family trust named the seller's last name and the street address, family trust. So let's say you go buy a property from Mike Smith, 123 Jump Street, it would be labeled Smith, 123 Jump Street Smith Family Trust. And then, so that's the actual owner of it. And then the beneficiary is your LLC. The reason why we do that too is the Garn-St. Germain Act of like 82 or 84 states that you can transfer real estate without the due on sales clause being called for estate or tax planning purposes. So if you're transferring it to a family trust, most banks will then be like, okay, this is just a estate holding, and then won't dig any further. So that's how we've always constructed those. And then we exit the exact same way, either on a lease option or a sub 2.
What about the payments? So I've heard on some of those where the buyer that you end up then turning around and selling it to, I know there's different servicing companies where they could pay one company, and then that company and then cuts the check to the existing mortgage. Do you use any of those, or just go straight to the whoever's holding the note?
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't use a loan servicer. If I know, if you're participating in a lot of those types of transactions, like in the state of Texas, they highly recommend that. Subject to deals are very popular in the state of Texas. There's actually some legislation, if I'm not misquoting, that actually has subject to in it. They highly recommend a loan servicing company. But in our deals, we're typically just paying the loan directly to the bank. And we're doing that because we have our own bookkeepers. We have a finance department. But if I'm a single, solopreneur, I may use a loan servicer just to make sure it's done. Especially if you're going to get into some technicalities like wrap mortgages and things like that, where now you have another loan and now you're servicing the original loan, and it could get rather convoluted if you're doing it on your own and you're just getting started.
Yeah, I would think just for the buyer, just making sure that they know things are actually getting paid the way they're supposed to and all that. But that's neat. And so as far as those go, then ultimately you mentioned a little bit ago that you're looking for the buyer to become, financeable from a lender at some point, right? And so do we do any reporting of, their payments to kind of help them build that? I know even with some of my rental property, the application that I use for managing it, there's an option for them to be able to report. It costs them a little extra, but then it, shows up on their credits so you can see that they've been paying on time and whatnot.
Oh, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the difference between us and other, I'd say, rent-to-own programs. There's plenty of people out there that are doing creative financing and will literally tell you just to collect non-refundable deposits, and who cares if they get to the finish line. Morally and ethically, I mean, it's absolutely terrible. Legally, it might be okay. So we have built our entire model around making sure that we're not only vetting the buyers to a certain extent, but then bringing them to a very specific process in order to help them either increase their credit or have them show that they make X amount of money, or what banks call seasoning, for a certain period of time. So yeah, absolutely. We want to make sure that not only are all their non-refundable deposits sourced, so that way the banks can credit that towards the purchase price, but also making sure that every payment that they're doing is reported. That way we can help them improve their credit, because at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is get someone to the finish line. And that's why we have such a high rate of people actually qualifying for loans. We're north of the 80% compared to, the rest of the rent to own market, which is probably flipped on its head, where it's maybe, one or two out of 10 actually get to the finish line. Because if we really want to create a long-term deal, and this is usually what most people will bring up, and they'll say, all right, well, if you're doing rent to own, then you're turning and burning deals. It's like every 3 years, you're going to go get a new deal. And that could be true with some real estate assets. But if you're moving away from, lease optioning properties, or a lease purchase, which is where you're controlling it and not owning it, and you're moving into the ownership quadrant, let's say, of creative financing, where you're buying properties and you have seller financing, where the seller's the bank and you're the actual owner of it, or you're buying properties subject to the existing loan. Well, now, depending upon the terms that you agreed upon with the original seller, you now have the ability to create like a wrap mortgage, or now become the bank. And now these deals could last, 10, 20, 30 years if you so choose to. Well, now this buyer never has to go to a bank. Now you're the bank. And that's how you really create some of those long-term deals over time as well.
Yeah. How about on the financing side? Do y'all have any mortgage lenders that you work with that you can pass the deal and hopefully, I mean, I could see the from a business relationship, a good opportunity if you're already doing this with, thousands of people to be able to actually get some kind of that loan origination under your name.
Yeah, we've actually found that the best relationships or contacts are local banks. They're the ones that are willing to either help qualify these people ahead of time, like instead of like a large corporate bank. We tend to work really well with the small local banks, credit unions, because now you can get buyers that may be slightly out of their credit as well, but have showed improvement to be able to now become homeowners rather quickly. So that's what we always teach our students to do, is develop those local relationships with the lenders and also attorneys as well, especially the ones that know the ins and outs of the local county and state laws in regards to creative financing.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That's neat. So how about closing? Are they typically closing at title companies or attorneys' offices, or what does that look like? I'm sure that it varies from state to state, I'm sure. So
yeah, it does vary from state to state. I always recommend that no matter what, even if they're closing at title companies, that they do have their real estate attorney in a local market. The way we actually do our buyer closings, and I'm doing a quote like that because we call them closing, but really they're formal lease signings at the beginning. So the buyer, that's where we collect the non-refundable deposit. The buyer actually signs and sits in an attorney's office and signs in front of an attorney. So now your attorney is actually your lead witness if there's any type of challenge that popped up, like if they are ever defaulted, and we could talk about what would happen in a default scenario. But then also the attorney can help clarify some of the agreement as well if people have any questions asked. So now what we're really doing is we're setting that tone at the beginning that this is a serious, I'm buying a house. I just don't have my own loan yet, or I don't hold title yet on this property, because now they are doing that formal lease signing in front of the attorney. So we always do recommend that. Now, again, like you said, varies state to state, especially starting to go out west. They're all title states. We do have a relationship with a national title company. It's just at the end of the day, title companies are all about processing transactions. They're not necessarily there to have your best interest in mind. They're just there to, close the deal per se.
Right. Earn their fees as well on it and stuff. So, yeah, it makes sense. What about, so with somebody who does this, one of your students, and actually for the benefit, you mentioned a minute ago, default. Obviously you're collecting an initial down payment, but if you want to talk a little bit about, how that works, because there's going to be some people that are concerned about, well, hey, if I do this and I'm the one holding it, what potential problems may exist? So.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, with real estate, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? No matter what, it's not all, it's definitely not all roses out there. That's why our lease purchase agreement's like 17 pages now. It's all of our learning lessons, all in one agreement. Yeah. So when you're working with a buyer in a rent to own program, the way it really is set up is there's two pieces of the agreement. There's the option, or the purchase rider, which basically states that I'm buying this property at a certain price and I have a certain time frame to go ahead and purchase it. And that's what keeps that purchase rider from defaulting is the non-refundable deposit up front. And then also what we do is we structure non-refundable deposits over time as well, over the course of their lease, to, number one, help that buyer get their down payment up so they don't have to qualify for as much of a loan. And number two, benefit of being the investor, to keep their feet to the fire. Because if they only make a payment and they have 3 years to get the option, they're more likely to default because it's not constantly in front of them. So we increase that over time. So the non-refundable deposits are tied to that purchase rider. And then the other piece is the lease agreement. So that lease agreement now is tied to the monthly rent or the monthly payment that they're making to you for rent or access to that property. So depending upon where the buyer defaults, and hopefully they don't, but if the buyer defaults on rent, now we have to go through an eviction because they've now defaulted. Now it has to go to tenant law, and now they defaulted on rent. So now we have to work on removing them. If the buyer defaults on their payments, now they've lost the option to purchase the property, and they now have a 10-day right of rescission in order to do so. So at that point in time, now they've lost the option to purchase it. Now they're just moving to traditional renters. So as you can see, you as a real estate investor, although it may be scary if you first get involved in real estate investing, period, that there's a bunch of things that could go wrong. When it comes to a rent-to-own program, you have so much leverage because, especially if you're accepting the right buyer, because if they're coming in with 3, 5, 10% on a property, they don't want to lose that much money. So they start to act differently. The way I always look at it is a buyer and a renter treat your house differently. So what we're really trying to do is we're finding buyers that just need time to qualify for a loan. So that's how those would be handled. Now, again, all tenant laws are different in counties and states. So that's why you have to know your tenant laws in case, it's to know when, or if they missed a payment, when do you send the first letter? When do you send it to your attorney to really understand how it works in that state, in that county?
Yeah, Zach, did you see anything during COVID as far as, moratoriums to be able to, any of your investors see any of that? I know I had it. We ended up being fortunate with, there were some rental assistance programs out there. So, I didn't get the rent initially, but ultimately they made me whole. But anyway, just curious more than anything else.
No, it's a great question. And that is, we actually probably saw less default than the traditional rental market. And that's because nor does it say in any of our agreements that if that was to happen, that they were still going to be able to exercise their option on this property. That may have helped them stay in the house, right? But they would now lose their option to purchase it. No, we worked with, don't get me wrong, Keith, we worked with many people to figure out ways in order to keep them becoming the homeowner. Because at the end of the day, I'm not trying to collect non-refundable deposits and kick people out. I'd rather work with them. It's actually, in full transparency, it's probably more profitable to keep the original person in the house. But we saw very few of our people default, or at a bare minimum, more people came out and communicated with us to create game plans in order to ensure that they got their, keep their option in place.
Yeah, that's great. And so as far as maybe we could talk just a little bit about your services and, kind of how, what is coaching cost, and, what is, how does somebody get involved with you?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Keith. So there's 2 ways in order to get involved with us. We have kind of 2 lanes per se. We have a 90-day to a 6-month program that we work people on. That's primarily, say a group coaching component. It has a curriculum base. You work through it. And really what we're trying to do is help you get to your first deal. As we speak right now, it's about 153 days time to first contract for somebody. So brand new real estate investor, it takes them roughly, just under 5 months in order to get their first property under agreement. So we work with them through the entire, process of getting their lead gen set up to, how to speak with sellers, to negotiations, contracts, to getting their first property under agreement, to then selling it. So that's kind of the first way. The secondary way is we have a select group of people that we call associates. Now, those associates we actually lock arms with, and we help them implement and do deals with them consistently over the course of, it could be 18 months up to about 3 years. And we split revenue on those deals. But what we'll really do is we're helping place deals into their own portfolio, and then we'll get a coaching component split from it. But this type of support is, you got coaches on the phones with sellers, helping generate leads, to negotiations, to making sure that our dream team is there in order to help make sure all the deals are are executed properly. And then we work with them the life of those deals in order to make sure that they, eliminate pitfalls and really help them maximize profits.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes people need that, right? They can go to they can go and learn or listen to a podcast and learn, some basics, but ultimately sometimes having that hand holding, for a lack of a better word, to kind of take them from, gee, I'm going to make an offer to actually closing on the deal and all that good stuff is, it's a huge benefit to,
especially your first couple deals, right?
Right.
One of the main reasons why most people don't get involved in real estate investing is because they're afraid they're not going to have enough support. It's like, what's going to happen when I do X? And I don't want to make a mistake. So for us to be able to literally step in and just say, all right, you will jump on a 3-way phone call. I'll handle the negotiation. I'll make sure that everything's going to go right. Then I'll make sure that we review the contracts the right way and structure the deal properly. And then even on the other side now, let's make sure we vet the buyer properly. Let's make sure we're actually bringing a buyer into the house and not a tenant. And then making sure that all those agreements are done properly. And then even most importantly, if the deal goes sideways in 6, 12, 24 months from now, and all of a sudden, a life event happens to the buyer and they have to leave, well, now we got to turn over the property, or if you have to deal with an eviction, now how do you handle that? And those are the things that, are everyday things that happen in real estate, right? We're all used to it now. But, when somebody's first getting started, it can be quite daunting. So just being able to have someone to lean on to say, all right, now what do we do? And be able to really just step in the driver's seat on occasions as a coach and drive the car and get it to where it needs to be, and help them profit from deals that they may not have been able to get if they're out there on their own.
Yeah. And so a big piece of it too is actually finding the deals. So I assume you're teaching them and they're ultimately going to be the ones finding the potential leads. And as they start rolling in, then you may be helping them with, kind of next step type of thing.
Yeah, 100%. The idea is at the end that they're self-sufficient businesses, because we don't want someone to have to be tied to us forever. But what we want to do is help them work through their first, say, 18 months or 3 years of their business journey, help them do the deals and really get their business lifted off the ground. I think I saw a stat, it's like less than 5% of people that set out to become real estate investors actually successfully do it. And usually that happens because their first real estate deal they do either goes sideways and they're like, this doesn't work, or they start the process of generating leads and everyone tells them no, and all of a sudden they're like, this doesn't work. So we're really trying to help lift off the ground. And then once they have a decent real estate portfolio, now they're in a position where they can start growing and building their own wealth.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's a great benefit and a really neat program that you've got. How can people find out more about it? Where can they take a look a little closer at what you've got to offer?
Yeah, I'd love to make sure that anybody that listens to this is getting access to our first Amazon best-selling book. It really dives deep into kind of who we are, first and foremost, then exactly what our strategies are, how we execute them, case studies in there as well. So we'll make sure that they get access to that. All you have to do is go to wickedsmartbooks.com/wealthflow. That's wickedsmartbooks.com/wealthflow. Go ahead and grab it. It's absolutely free. We'll ship it out to you. Hardcover book. That'll really, I think it'll open up your eyes, your perspective on how to get involved in real estate investing, especially from a creative financing standpoint. And then you can also find us on all, the normal social medias, like on Instagram, it's at Smart Real Estate Coach. Facebook, same thing. YouTube, just type of Smart Real Estate Coach. We're on all your TikTok. We're on all your social media platforms.
Cool. Yeah, and do you have on those kind of posting some of the deals and some of the different things that are happening? Yeah. Cool.
Oh yeah, for the past over 3 years now, every single Sunday we've had a deal structure Sunday on there. So it's either one of our deals and we walk you through it. You'll see some of the videos are so bad quality, but they're really good deals. When we first started. And now, primarily the deals nowadays are our students' deals because we're consistently doing a high volume with them now. So we break down like where we found it, how the conversation was to why we structured it that way, how we exited the deal, who the buyer was, and then the projected paydays, or if it's actually closed, the actual paydays on the deal.
Yeah. One other thing, for somebody who maybe is considering investing in just, single family, but maybe not approaching it from a creative standpoint, there's a little bit of a cap as far as how many loans you can have in your name, right? So, there's ways, obviously, you can graduate to more portfolio type loans, but for most people, you get 10 under your belt, and your spouse maybe could get another 10, so now you got 20. But there's a little bit of a cap there, and I can see how with creative financing, there's really no cap. You can continue to build it.
Well, the other thing too is on the 20, right? You're all personally guaranteeing that debt. On ours, there's not a single one of the deals that we've ever done besides my own personal residence. Even this commercial building is not personally guaranteed. It's all through our LLCs. So they've never ran my personal credit. We've done a probably just under $1 million on the water in southeastern Massachusetts, seller financing, not a personal guaranteed debt. So just when we look at it just from that perspective, and that is like, it's probably one of the most risk averse niches that you could get involved with. Now, can you lose some deals because somebody wants a cash offer, or they want you to, personally guarantee the debt? Sure. That'll be up to you at that point in time. We just had a very select group of rules that we wanted to go by. And so that'd be a deal killer for us, but maybe for somebody else it wouldn't. Or I know others use creative financing, then they go refinance out on them as well. We personally don't. So as you start to grow your business, then you start to decide what you can live with and what you can't live with when it comes to your portfolio.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, I think you brought a ton of value, Zach, and just wanted to maybe ask you a couple more questions before we wrap it up, if that works for you. What I always like to start with is just, any advice that you would have for somebody who maybe has been thinking about investing in real estate. Maybe they're, as you mentioned, a W-2 professional and looking at some point to try to get out of that. Any advice for them?
Yeah, this is the same advice I would give anyone that's trying to do anything, not just specifically real estate. First and foremost, I would just figure out what is that niche, whether it's a business, whether it's real estate investing. And if you dive into real estate investing, because it's a real estate show, there's so many niches out there that you can get involved in. Find one that you resonate, because if you're working a W-2 and you have a family, and then all of a sudden now you're going to take time away from your family in pleasure time, right? And now you're going to go spend time doing it. Go find something that you can get behind and be passionate about first, because everyone will know and you won't burn out. Because I'm not crazy to say we're not the only niche. It's not like creative financing or nothing. There's so many different niches out there. So find one that you can resonate with. Then find a person or a group of people that have been and are actively doing real estate deals in that niche. And I would always say they're at least 3, if not 5 or 10 years ahead of you, but are actively doing it. That's most important, because the market is forever shifting. Then buy in or commit and put the blinders on. The thing about real estate and the popularity of coaching and products and all that stuff out there is shiny object is a real thing. The commitment and dedication to one niche is how you master it and how you actually see success long term. Like the people that Keith's interviewing, it's like they didn't just dabble in all these things. They got really good at something for a long period of time, and then maybe they delegated and grew it out and then decided to move on to another project. But first they wanted to master what that was, and that's where they developed not only the wealth of knowledge, but then the wealth that comes with it. So then just put your blinders on and get after it for the next 3 to 5 years.
That's great advice. All right. Well, I think we're kind of at time here, but I really appreciate you being on, and excited to have our listeners go to, again, you want to say Wicked, was it?
Yeah, it's wickedsmartbooks.com/wealthflow, wickedsmartbooks.com/wealthflow. As you can tell, from Massachusetts, wickedsmartbooks.com/wealthflow.
All right, sounds good. And we'll obviously put it in the show notes, and really appreciate it. Thank you, Zach.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.